Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry, episode 5, where we are kind of jumping around a little bit here. Like we're in the same day-to-day transition, but we saw one scene and then we went and we were going to see another scene and then the day crossed over and now we're going back to the original scene, which honestly, I'm pretty interested in both happenings here. Natsuhi got another phone call from the mysterious guy that claims to be her son. And I don't know, that stuff is getting pretty wild, but there's the potential, the possibility of there being another character on this island. Even so, I thought we were just, with 18 alive people here, there could be a 19th. We're going right back to the possibility of there being a 19th person on the island. Hard to say, though. We could be getting messed with here. This could be someone that doesn't necessarily exist on the island, but the perception is there that they exist. And then we're in the dining room. That's where we're heading back to, I believe. And there was a strange knock at the door because everybody should have been accounted for at this time. Let's step back in time once again. Right now, it's the exact moment that the large clock in the hall announced midnight. Wondering who the person who knocked twice was, the relatives in the dining hall stared at the door. Rudolph told them to come in, but there was no answer. Until the end of that long tone marking the arrival of midnight, which had come from the large clock in the hall shortly after the knock, they were unable to move in the slightest.
手が塞がってて開けられないんじゃないのか。
かもな。だが名乗らねえってのが薄気味悪いな。
開けますか。開けなさい。
Kano nodded back and then slowly opened the door. All right, who do we got, if anybody?
それは
What's what?
これは
Oh no. Here we go. Here we go. Right behind the open door on the floor of the hallway lay the envelope.
廊下には誰もいません。
Now, keep in mind, not necessarily everyone is accounted for. I kind of lied earlier. But not everyone really is. Sure, we're expecting some people to be asleep in the guest house. But we don't actually know that they are.
これを置いて立ち去ったのでしょうか。
The adults flew out into the corridor as well, but they could find no trace of anyone who might have knocked on the door. Just about an hour ago, Shannon and Kanun had come in to serve tea. At that time, everyone had seen that nothing lay in that spot. Someone came, knocked, left an envelope with the mark of the one-winged eagle on it, and then left.
まさか親方様でしょうか。
考えられない話じゃないわ。この屋敷で誰と呼ばれて返事をしないのはお父様くらいだもの。
ありえないわ。ならどうしてお父様は堂々と入ってこないの？
そうやな。お父さんだったらノックなどせずいきなり入ってくるやろな。今この屋敷は戸締まりがされとるんやろ。ならここに手紙を置くことができるんはクラウスさんか夏日さん。そして
By this point, the mansion had been completely locked up, so those that are in the guest house couldn't have come in here. Therefore, the cousins in the guest house, Nanjo, Goda, Kumasawa, and Erika could not have been here. Furthermore, since Kraus, Natsuhi, and Genji were the only three who weren't in this room, one of those three had to have been the one who set the letter down in the corridor. And we know it can't be Kinzo because Kinzo isn't alive. So it was very likely that Kraus and the others had placed the letter there to make it seem like a message from Kinzo. I mean, yeah, if we didn't see that other scene, yeah, I would have believed so as well. The possibility was there, but we did get a whole nother scene there, and therefore no.
お父様の名を語ってバトラ君を次期当主に認めないみたいなことが書いてあるのよ。
Well, let's open up the letter. Let's see what it says.
バカバカしい。兄さん、よくもこんな子供騙しを。
別に俺は次期当主なんて興味ねえぞ。
諦めろ。それがお前の運命なんだよ。とにかく中身を読んでみようじゃねえか。
Yes, please. Rudolph set the letter on the dining hall table and let everyone see the front and back, to show that there were no tricks or hidden mechanisms. Almost like a magician does before performing his act.
この封筒は間違いなくお父様の封筒なの？
Only one person can make that stamp.
ええ、間違いないわ。
However, again, no one knows that Kinzo's been dead for over a year. They don't realize the fact that anybody could have his ring.
お父様が神書に好んで使う封筒よ。どう、シャノンちゃん。
はい、私の目にも親方様が使われる封筒に見えます。
だからってお父様が書いたってことにはならないわよ。兄さんならお父様の書斎の引き出しからひょいと手に入れることなんて造作もない話だわ。
クラウス様とて容易に書斎には入れません。封筒を盗み出すなど難しいことかと。
開けてみようぜ。それから考えても遅くないはずだ。何か入ってるよ。なんだろうな。
Yeah, maybe a letter is in there, I don't know. Rudolph opened the envelope a bit roughly, and then a folded letter and a glittering object fell out. Is it the ring? Yep, there we go.
ちょっとその指輪。
Ava noticed it immediately and grabbed at it.
これお父様の指輪よ。当主の指輪だわ。
なんやて？ほんまか？
間違いなくお父様の指輪なの？レプリカということは？
これは本物よ。私はいつかこの指輪を自分の指に通してやるとずっと夢見てきたのよ。お父様が指にしてた時から私は誰よりもこの指輪のことをよく知ってるわ。これはお父様の指輪よ、間違いなく。どうしてここに？
じゃあやっぱりこの手紙はお父様が。
Well, let's read the letter first before we even begin to ask that question.
こりゃ差出人は親父じゃねえぞ。もっと面白い。
I'm glad he's having fun with this.
誰からの手紙だって？
後ろ宮家顧問錬金術師黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェ様からだぜ。
Now, here we go. We all know this sort of deal. Rudolph showed everyone the part of the letter where that was written. It really did say that.
ベアトリーチェから？なんて書いてある？
読むぞ。コングラッチュレーションズ。バトラ様が碑文の謎を見事に解かれ、黄金鏡にたどり着きましたことを認めます。
Okay, so it has been acknowledged. Everyone is in total understanding here that Battler is the ones who have reached the goal destination here. And it's very much unlike how in episode 3 it was a bit of a secret. You know, only one person knew, and that was Rosa.
黄金はすべてバトラ様のものです。そして後ろ宮家の新しき当主もバトラ様です。その証として金蔵様よりお預かりしている当主の指輪をお送りします。どうぞバトラ様、指輪をされて新しい黄金の主となり、どうか後ろ宮家をお導きください。新しき当主のご活躍を心よりお祈りいたしております。
A very different letter than the ones that we are used to reading from Beatrice around this time here in the dining room, huh?
なんてこった。親父が書斎から出てこねえもんだから。森の魔女ベアトリーチが直接バトラを認めてくれたわけだ。
バトラ君、この指輪はあなたが持つの。これが当主が身につけるべき。ベアトリーチェが何者か知らないけれど、彼女は一部始終を見届け、あなたが真の跡継ぎだと認めてこの指輪を送ったのよ。
いいんすか、こんな重要な指輪を。
ああ、いいんだ。誇らしげに指にはめるといい。いいか、兄貴や夏日さんが外せと言っても絶対に外すんじゃねえぞ。
All of the relatives with creepy smiles on their faces urged Battler to put the ring on his finger. It looked like things would get pretty nasty if he refused, so Battler reluctantly decided to put it on the middle finger of his left hand. The ring was heavy and stiff. At that moment, Kraus returned. Genji came back as well shortly behind him.
申し訳ないね。妻は具合が悪そうだったので、先に休ませてもらった。何かあったのかね?
Oh yeah, we're not going to see Natsuhi for the remainder of the night. She will not come back out of her room until like her regular waking time. Like she is really in her own closed room here.
なんだか諸君がひどく慌ただしいようだ。バトラ様、それは。
Immediately, Genji keenly spotted that which battler had just put on his finger.
さすが源氏さんや。これが誰の指輪かわかるようやな。
何の話だね。
Judging by Kraus's dubious expression, it seemed unlikely that he was the one who placed the letter there. Furthermore, that expression quickly changed into one of shock.
そうよ。Ushiromiya家当主の指輪よ。
The family conference took up this new topic, and the storm came once again. It's interesting because I guess you could say that there's also an argument that... Oh, we're going forward a little bit here. Man, a little past 3 a.m. Are we getting any sleep? Any sleep at all? But, if you guys recall from whenever we jumped back into the game board here, into this rendition of the story here on Rokkenjima, Erika herself declared that Natsuhi was the culprit. She just straight up pointed her fingers at her and was telling her, "You're it. This is it." And, I mean, we didn't know what was going on. The first twilight already occurred. However, why is the ritual still going on if a successor has already been determined? There shouldn't be a quote-unquote ritual. There's obviously more going on here than we think. And maybe that's where the separation of the epitaph and this whole ceremony is supposed to indicate in this episode. They're not necessarily as related as we thought. It's pretty much as Battler was saying, X and Y equals 0, but if you add them together, then they're greater than 0. That seems to be the direction we're heading for sure, but I can definitely see how we could be given a misinterpreted direction, and Natsuhi could have been the one to act. She's the only one with keys to that room. And I mean, she could have set things up in such a way, especially since she's, having the schizophrenic conversations with Beatrice. The rain was still pouring down as hard as ever. This weather was supposed to continue all day tomorrow as well, which made me feel a bit depressed. Oh, wait. Given the time, I should say today, and not tomorrow. But that doesn't really matter now. I do the same thing, honestly. If I stay up late and midnight is past, I'll still say, like, today, even so it's technically yesterday, and not tomorrow. I'm sleepy. With half-asleep eyes, I opened my umbrella. The large drops of rain pounded mercilessly against it. Technically, the end of the family conference had been declared at 1 a.m., but external scuffles kept continuing sluggishly. I'm really jealous of Aunt Rosa, who managed to slip out of there at that time. She cleverly got away by saying that she'd check on Maria, who might have been staying up too late. Dad caught me ruining my chance to escape, and they made me stick around until now, 3 a.m. So, what have they decided on after all this time? Nothing. Yep, there it is. They just kept on arguing about who said what, like elementary school kids. I'm sure they're tired too. That's probably why they keep dragging on with the same pointless questions. I no longer felt any shock or anger towards them. I guess drowsiness is the best painkiller. I left them behind and finally returned to the guest house. Yeah, and we're leaving them behind in a way that we could just never truly anticipate, huh? When I got back to the guest house, the first floor lounge was lit. I could even hear people chatting inside. Apparently some people were still awake even this late. Oh. Despite the late hour, Goda-san and Dr. Nanjo were still up and chatting. Plates and cups were lined up on the counter, and it looked almost like a bar with Goda-san as the bartender. When they noticed I had returned, they seemed to finally realize how late it was. When Goda-san made to top off Dr. Nanjo's glass, The latter declined with an exaggerated gesture.
もう結構です。この時間では夜更かしのしすぎだ。
Yeah, especially for your age, you need to get into bed, old man.
もうこんな時間とは。南條先生があまりにお話がお上手なもので、ついつい。
それを言ったらあんたの酒の魚のおかげだ。また別の機会に一杯やりましょう。
喜んで。バトラー様、お帰りなさいませ。まだ旦那様方の会議は続いておりますか？あの調子でグダグダと明け方までやるんだろうぜ。知ったことじゃねえぜ。
Sorry, I was getting a drink of water, but it is kind of your business. I spoke carelessly with a big yawn.
皆さん、案外体力が終わりですね。
Why are you still awake?
びっくりです。
なんだ、お前までいたのか。
なんとなく流れでこちらでささやかな夜会が始まったもので混ぜてもらっていました。例のことは話してませんのでご安心を。
Erica could be seen on the sofa. She had taken her shoes off and was lounging around as though she owned the place.
エリカ様も本当にいろいろなお話をご存知で、とても楽しく聞かせていただきました。
あんたは本当に博識だ。若いのに大したもんだよ。
どういたしまして。フルドエリカはこの程度には博識ですので。
Erica grabbed the corners of her skirt and posed. This was somewhat less than graceful, considering that she was lounging on the sofa with her feet up.
ローザおばさんは午前の1時頃にお戻りになりましたが、すぐに上がられお休みになられました。
That's probably true. After taking part in that conference for so long, I feel like flopping down in bed right away myself. I've had it. I'm tired enough that I might flop over right here.
さあ、私たちもこれくらいにしましょう。
Have you guys ever had such a, like, you're so tired, you know? You're absolutely fucking exhausted. And so you decide, oh, couch. And you just sleep on that thing. And you sleep on it hard. Like, better than any surface any bed could ever provide. The couch really came to the rescue, you know? Have you guys ever had that sort of, you know, moment? Because I never have. My bed is just way too good.
ゴーダさんも明日の朝食の準備で朝が早いのでしょ？
朝食の仕込みはすでに済んでおります。どうぞ明日の朝食も大いにご期待いただければ幸いです。
In Goda-san's eyes, the family conference is an open stage on which to display his culinary skills. Maybe this invigorates him so much that he doesn't even get sleepy. Erica stood up, laughing at how youthful Goda was. This became a sign that it was time to disperse.
お片付けは私の方でしておきます。どうぞ皆様はお休みを。
Leaving the cleanup to Goda-san, I went to the bathroom and then climbed up the stairs to the second floor. Sleep finally awaits us.
それでは皆さん、
It's like right there, you know? Sleep is just right around the corner.
老骨にはちと夜更かしが過ぎましたな。
That's what I've been saying.
おやすみなさい、南條先生。おやすみなさい、バトラさん。
おう、おやすみ。
Then in the second floor hallway, we split up. Dr. Donjo went to his own room. Erica went to her room. And I returned to the cousin room. I like how everybody just faded one by one there. I couldn't hear any sounds of playing coming from our room. Could they have fallen asleep already? No surprise at this time of night. If they were still playing, they would have been staying up way too late. When I opened the door quietly, as expected, the room was already pitch black except for a small nightlight. Everyone was already sleeping in their beds. I'm sure they all had a great time and played a ton. Then they probably talked about youthful things and enjoyed staying up late. If only I hadn't found the gold, I could have enjoyed my time with them. Yeah, we're already seeing that this shit's a bit of a curse, aren't we? I'm already tired, so tired. Forgetting to even change my clothes or brush my teeth, I crawled into bed and immediately began to descend into the marshes of sleep. Today has been so insane. I wonder if that old bastard is still in that family conference now. How does he not get tired? Come to think of it, what was it that old bastard said when we parted company? Damn, too bad we're not going to have that conversation. I'm pretty sure you die. I'm sure it's more stuff about being the successor. I don't even want to hear about it. What the fuck? I'll kill you whenever you want, you old bastard. And then, what was it he said next? Okay, yeah, that is important. That seems to be a pretty big topic of discussion here. My birth? Probably just something about the noble Ushiromiya lineage. Not interested. Just let me sleep. Oh, you'll get your sleep. At least I hope, you know? You'll get it all right. And then you'll have one hell of a day. And then it will all come crashing down. What an ominous fucking chapter name. Sorry, I try not to look at those. The sound of crashing waves. The sound of the tide surging. The noise of the sea breeze. Whenever my headache torments me, these are the sounds that fill my head. Oh, I can already tell you guys we're following Natsuhi. Yep. Unable to bear a successor, I was in a very difficult position with regards to the Ushiromiya family. Whenever I heard of a drug or incense that could make you achieve pregnancy, I tried it, but nothing had any effect. Until I was blessed with Jessica 18 years ago. I was ashamed to even call myself a wife. I mean, everybody's bodies work differently. Health is always a major factor. I mean, Hank Hill had a narrow urethra. I mean, he struggled with Peggy. Ava tried to convince father that I was a failure as the successor's wife. It was a time when Kinzo was also very disappointed by my husband's repeated business failures. On the other hand, Ava's husband, Hideyoshi's business was growing well, completely the opposite of my husband's. He was the only person who could bring father good news. So perhaps father couldn't be blamed if he decided to lend an ear to Ava's words, or even accept them completely. It was all my fault, because I couldn't bear a child. On occasion, yeah. The head gave to many charities, thinking it the duty of anyone in possession of so much money. One among these, an orphanage known as the, well, it's saying gospel, but the Fukuyin house, had been given especially large donations, possibly because he had old ties with that place. You know, it had been a long time since we kind of discussed that. That was where Shannon and Kanon came from. There's got to be something to that, more than we've been thinking. That's been a topic we have not discussed since, what, episode 2, maybe?
社会活動と職業訓練の一環として福音の家の子たちの中から成績優秀な子を使用人として受け入れていました。当家にいるシャノンやカノン、ルノンやマノン、レノンなどの音の名を持つ使用人はすべてそこからやってきた子たちでした。
Yeah, we've never met Lunon, Manon, and Leon.
いろいろな連中がいたな。多くはほんの数年で辞めるがな。
当家の給金は数年も働けば十分社会で生活していけるだけたまるでしょうし、後宮家での使用人経験は履歴書に通用する立派な肩書きになります。それを得て社会へ羽ばたいてくれれば当主様もきっと本望だったでしょう。
なるほど、養子か。
So that might be it. That might be the deal there. There could be maybe somebody.
お父様。
There could be maybe somebody from that orphanage that has the ties now here to Natsu.
今何とおっしゃいましたか。
この赤子を我が孫として迎えよ。
おお、よしよしよし。よしよしよしよしよし。
Apparently, the baby that Kumasawa was trying to soothe didn't like the study air at all. It kept on crying, upset.
申し訳ありません。お父様、私には何をおっしゃっているのか。
この赤子を我が孫として迎えよ。そしてクラウスの後を継ぐ者として育てるのだ。
それはつまり私と夫の子として。
そうだ。お前に子が宿せぬことはもはや明白。お前の体には何かしらの問題があるに違いない。
You know, people just call that a health issue, but okay.
おお、よしよしよしよしよし。おお、よしよしよし。
As though she couldn't hear our discussion in the slightest, Kumasawa kept on trying to cuddle the baby. This made it cry even louder.
暴言だな。女の責任だけで子が産めるなら、この世に男など必要ないわ。
あの日の悔しさを忘れたことはありません。私とて子が欲しくなかったわけがない。でもいくら祈ろうとも身ごもれないのです。私の体に原因があるのではないかといくつもの名医を訪ね歩きました。しかしそれでもいくら努力しても身ごもれなかったのです。
その挙句がこの仕打ちではな。察するぞ。
The baby had been picked up by the Fukian house just recently. Of course, you couldn't help but feel compassion for this child, who was so young and who had already lost its parents' affection. However, it brought me nothing but pain and sadness. It would have been another story if I had suffered to bear this child. But why should I be forced to hold this baby, who not only shared none of my blood, but who was not related to my husband in the slightest either?
お父様を恨んではいません。もし恨めるのなら、ただただ死にくかったんです。子を宿せぬ我が身がひたすらに。だから私は祈りました。天使と悪魔の両方に。そしてその両方が叶いました。
天使には何と祈ったか。
私の体に奇跡を。私の体に問題があるというならそれを受け入れましょう。ならばそれを克服してどうか夫の子を授かることのできる奇跡を私に。
その願いは叶ったわ。あなたはその次の年に見事にジェシカを産むことになる。
そして悪魔には何と祈ったか。
悔しい悔しい、この身が恨めしい。そしてそれを見せつける
Oh no.
この赤ん坊が憎かったんです。
何を願われたのですか。
私は初めて悪魔に祈りました。この赤ん坊が消えてなくなってしまえばいいのにって。
Of course, that wish was also granted by demons. On that day, I left the baby with an older servant and went to think about the future in the rose garden. No, that's a lie. I didn't want to think about anything. The baby's cries were annoying, so I ordered the servant to take the baby to a place where I couldn't hear. By a place where I couldn't hear, I meant somewhere far away. Yes, I wished for it. I wished for the servant to take the baby far away and never return. Oh, that's fucked. That's really fucked.
雪吊りの悪魔が夏日様のその願いを聞いてしまったのですな。
してどうなったのか。
それは悪魔が願いを叶えてくれたとしか思えない。
The woodland path from the rose garden to the harbor is probably well suited for a comfortable walk. It must surely feel good to occasionally leave the path and walk through a grove of trees depending on your mood. However, wouldn't that path be fairly hard to travel on when taking a walk with a baby in your arms?
その先は断崖でした。
I had a feeling we were headed towards a cliff here.
高さは多分10メートルくらいはあったと思います。下は岩場。そこには柵もあったのです。その使用人はわざわざそんなところまで赤ん坊を抱いたまま歩いていけ、そして柵に寄りかかったとでも言うのでしょうか。まるで悪魔に手招きされて誘われたとしか思えない。
誘われちゃったのね。あなたの願いを聞いた悪魔がその使用人を招いちゃったんだわ。
それではその使用人と赤ん坊は。
Yeah. Similar story to what we heard over in episode 3, huh?
崖から転落して下の岩場に。いえ、私が願ったから死んだ。だからこれは
そなたのせいではない。その先を考える必要はないぞ。
でも私が願ったから。
いいや、違う。願えども叶えるか否かは神と悪魔と魔女の気まぐれ。そなたに罪はない。人間に罪はない。わらわが殺したことにしてもよい。いや、わらわが殺した。嘆くそなたを不憫に思い、わらわが赤子を連れた使用人を崖へいざない。
不幸な事故があっただけではありませんか。事故で納得がいかなくば我らの仕業に。そのための悪魔でございますよ。
そうだわ。私たちはそのためにいるのだもの。あなたが殺したわけもない。私たちが殺したのよ。だからあなたには何の罪もない。だからどうか自身を責めないで、夏日。
Okay, you know, bold prediction here, and I don't know if this is the right way to be thinking about it. I don't think any of this happened. I don't think that Kinzo offered up a child, a straight-up baby, to Natsuhi and Kraus for them to raise in place of Natsuhi actually, you know, giving birth to Jessica or a child in general. I don't think any of this happened. I think this is setting us up for confusion later on, but I don't know. Let's see. Let's continue along here. At the very least, it's very obvious that she's using these imaginary discussions with witches and demons here to shift the blame, I guess you could say, to make herself feel better.
19年前の復讐を名乗るワーコードね。呪うならわらわを呪うがよいわ。しかし呪うは魔女の専売特許よ。夏日に売りしその喧嘩、わらわが買おうではないか。わらわは後宮家顧問錬金術師黄金のベアトリーチェ。使えし主に売りし喧嘩はわらわが買おうぞ。19年前の復讐とな。1000年の魔女の前にその程度の年月、瞬きにも足りぬと知れ。19年前にそなたの死を願った夏日が憎いか。思い出させてやろうぞ。そなたを崖下へ誘ったのは誰かをな。
As the middle-aged female servant cuddled the sobbing baby, she walked on a small path through the trees. Natsuhi had told her that the baby was too loud, so she tried to get as far from the rose garden as she could. She was completely unaware as to why she had gone out of her way to head in this direction. However, the sobbing baby suddenly stopped crying. Something was reflected in its eyes, but the servant couldn't tell what. However, thinking that the baby had stopped because it had taken in an interest in something, she headed in the direction of the baby's gaze. Yeah, I don't buy any of this. The baby had seen a cloud of gold butterflies disappearing off into the trees. And on the other side of the trees, the servant could see a woman. Who? She didn't recognize this person, but it didn't look like anyone who was supposed to be here. The baby stopped crying and stared in that direction. Then the servant's legs started to automatically carry her that way. And then down we go. The woman couldn't disobey. She was completely overwhelmed by Beato's gold-glowing eyes. She walked lightly as though through a dream world. At some point, the scenery surrounding her had changed, but she did not notice. She could not notice. Though this should have been Rokkenjima, at some point it had become the garden of a mansion she had never seen before. It was a garden she had never set eyes on, even grander than the great rose garden of the Ushiromiya family, a garden of gold roses. There stood an arbor, and a woman wearing an elegant dress beckoning to her. There was a man who looked like a butler, and the tea he poured with a beautiful gesture had a very nice and enticing smell. It was as though they were telling her to join their tea party. She couldn't disobey. She had to go to the master of this golden rose garden and give this child as an offering. When Gap snapped her fingers, a pitch-black hole opened at the woman's feet, and she was swallowed up along with the baby. The scene of the moment that followed must have burned itself into the eyes of the woman and the baby. Oh, that's a fun sight. The two floated in the air and looked down at the gold rose garden spread out below them. Below their feet was not the earth, but a golden rose garden that stretched as far as the eye could see, without any gaps. If one could have this scene imprinted in their minds, there we go, as their last memory, that would be such a merciful way to die. Then the woman and the baby were swallowed up by the golden sea. The thunk was remarkably plain, and remarkably quiet for a sound that stole away 2 lives. However, it made for a perfectly suitable show at a tea party of witches. Again, not buying any of this. With the woman and the baby at the center, the rose garden was slowly swallowed up by darkness. The sound of the wind grew stronger bit by bit. Is that TV static? What is that noise? It was the roar of the sea. The two who had fallen into the thicket of golden roses from that great height and died were gradually wrapped up in the roar of the sea, wrapped up in the scenery of the beach below the cliff. That's rough. And she wanted to become a mother?
主人は出張中でした。当時まだお屋敷にお住まいだったローザさんもご友人と旅行中でした。ロッケン島には私とお父様しかいなかった。 そして私とお父様以外誰もよく知らぬ間にどこからともなく赤ん坊が現れ、そして消えていった。あれはそう夢なのよ。悪夢。お父様は私を責めるに違いないと思っていました。しかし何か様子がおかしかった。
I mean, that's pretty much typical Kinzo right there.
読めていたぞ、読めていたぞ、この天罰はがどこまであがくのか、どこまで我が物にならぬというのか。からの檻に興味はない。打ち捨てい。
When Father learned of the accidental death, he kept on laughing and laughing as though there could be no greater pleasure, enough that just listening to it gave me a creepy feeling. Perhaps something had come loose in his mind. There we go. Something's loose in my mind. From that day onwards, Father shut himself up inside the world of the occult even more than he ever had before. When my husband came back, he was surprised to see that Father was even more bizarre than he had been before. However, he had already accepted that this would happen sooner or later. Of course, my husband had heard about the baby. However, he told me that it was surely just some whim of Father's and to forget it. So I forgot it. It was an unfortunate accident. No, there wasn't an accident at all. I forgot everything, even that the baby had existed in the first place. After all, it was a twisted nightmare that lasted not even 3 days. That's right, it was all a nightmare. I don't want to remember. The cliff, the broken fence, the roar of the sea, and the cry of the baby. What about the cry of the seagulls?
くだらぬ。わらわが殺した。すでにこの世にはおらぬわ。
しかし、赤き真実なきが人間の世界。人間の世界に信用できることなどありません。
Yeah, tell me about it.
そうね。ベアトは確かに殺したわ。でも、人間の世界では生きていることになっているのかもしれない。本当に生きているのかどうかはともかくね。
実は生きていたというのですか?
It could all just be in not Rose's, in Natsuhi's mind, her imagination playing tricks on her.
あの高さからあの岩場に転落して。
This is what we call insanity.
わからぬ。だが落ち着け。そやつがどうそなたを憎もうとも、真実は事故だ。そなたを恨もうなど、お門違いもいいところよ。
でも、たとえ指一本触れていないとしても、私は心の中で。
落ち着け。19年前の男が何を恨もうと叫ぼうと、そなたを追及できる罪などあるわけもない。だから落ち着け。19年前の男はわらわの来客として迎えてやろうぞ。碑文の謎を解かれ、お役はごめんかと思っていた矢先だ。わらわの最後の客としてもてなしてやらねばな。
面白くなってまいりましたな。
Tell me about it.
ゴールドスミス教の秘密を守るのに加え、19人目の来客。
Supposedly a 19th person is here. Supposedly. We gotta get some red truth on that one.
金蔵が生きてると主張する私たちにとって、その19人目の駒に19年前の男。面白いじゃない。
相手にとって不足なし。わらわの茶会の来客が一人では物足りないと思っていたところよ。来るがよい。
Yeah, the fact that Beatrice doesn't even know if there really is somebody else here or who it is. I mean, come on. Like, this is all just in Natsuhi's crazy imagination. Furuto Erika is Lady Bernkastel's piece. In that case, whose piece is the man from 19 years ago? I mean, we could say allegedly maybe Lambda Delta? Hard to say. But, alright, we'll wrap it up on that one for this one. But I just saw we are on Chapter 9. I I don't know how many chapters there are here, but a lot of these to start off with this episode have been fairly short, and I'm sure that'll pick up. It tends to as we approach the end, which we're nowhere near, I'm sure. But yeah, fun stuff, guys. Fun stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.